Snow whispered across the pines like a prayer, soft and ceaseless, blurring the line between earth and sky. In that pale quiet, a husky moved like smoke, fleet-footed, silver-backed, a ghost slipping through winter's hush. Behind him, Micah Callan came, boots crunching through a foot of drift, rifle slung across his shoulder, breath steaming slow and steady. He wasn't hunting game so much as solitude. Always had been. Since the war. Since the fire. Since he stopped calling any place home. The trail he followed curved along a frozen creek bed, half buried under ice so thin it sang beneath his weight. His husky, Aspen, paused now and again, snout raised, ears pricked. The dog had a way of hearing things Micah couldn't. Sorrow. Storms. Souls in the snow. Micah scratched his beard absently, eyes scanning the tree line. No deer prints, no rabbit runs. Only the clean, unmarked stillness of a world asleep under frost. He didn't mind. Silence was its own kind of company, and he'd long since learned to live with ghosts. Aspen stopped. Hackles lifted. His breath curled like smoke, and he let out a low, guttural whine. "What is it, boy?" The husky took off like a shot. Micah swore under his breath and followed, breaking into a slow, cautious run. The land dipped toward a hollow where the trees thinned and the creek widened into a half-frozen lake, wind-skinned and glass-bright. Aspen's paws skidded across the edge. He barked. Desperate. Urgent. Then Micah saw it. A wrecked sled, torn leather traces tangled in the reeds. The carcass of a horse nearby, legs stiff, eyes open to the sky. And beyond it, under a collapsing sheet of ice, movement. Micah dropped his rifle, slid down the embankment. His heart slammed against his ribs as he saw her, a woman, soaked and half-submerged, arms straining to keep two children afloat. Their faces were pale, their cries strangled by shock and cold. One of the girls, older, maybe 8 or 9, was limp in her mother's grasp. Without thinking, Micah crashed into the water. The cold hit like a hammer, shattering breath from his lungs, but he pushed forward, broke the ice with his forearm, reached for the mother first. Her skin was gray-blue, fingers cut and bleeding from clawing at the ice. "I've got you," he rasped. She didn't answer, just shoved the older girl toward him with the last of her strength. Aspen barked wildly from shore, pacing back and forth. Micah hauled the girl into his arm, then the younger one, teeth chattering as he felt his muscles stiffen. Last, the woman. He wrapped her in one arm, held all three against him, and staggered back toward land. The ice cracked under every step. It groaned like something dying. By the time they reached the bank, he could barely feel his limbs. He laid them gently in the snow, brushing hair from their faces. The older child was breathing, just barely. The younger whimpered once, then buried her face in his coat. The woman's eyes fluttered open, clouded, frantic. "You're all right," Micah murmured. "You're safe now." She tried to speak. Her lips trembled too hard. But she touched his face, and then whispered a name that stopped his heart cold. "Micah." He stared down at her, stunned. She didn't look like anyone he knew, thin, face hollowed by hunger and fear, but the way she said it was more than memory. It was recognition. Then her head lolled, and she collapsed into unconsciousness. The trail back to his cabin was long, and the weight in his arms heavier than the years he carried, but Micah never faltered. Aspen led the way, his eyes glancing back often, tail low, anxious. Snow thickened as they climbed the ridge, coating the woman's hair like a shroud. Micah's breath burned his throat. His coat was soaked. The girls clung to him, shivering in silence. His cabin came into view as dusk fell, logs dark and weathered, smoke still curling from the chimney like a lifeline. Inside, the fire was low but waiting. Micah kicked the door open with a grunt and carried the three of them in, one by one, laying them near the hearth. He wrapped them in every blanket he owned, stoked the flames, and stripped off his wet coat. His hands shook as he poured warm broth into tin cups. The younger girl blinked up at him as he pressed one to her lips. "Drink slow now," he said, voice roughened by cold and awe. She obeyed without question, her fingers clutching his like a lifeline. The older girl stirred but didn't speak. The woman, the one who'd spoken his name, remained still, her breathing shallow, lips tinged blue. Micah knelt beside her, brushed wet strands of hair from her cheek, and studied her face. She was beautiful in a way that hardship had not erased. Her cheekbones were sharp, her skin fair, freckled faintly, and there was a strength in the set of her brow, even unconscious. Something about her face pulled at the edges of memory. But the name she'd said, his name, how would she know it? He rose and found dry clothes, bundled her gently, checked her pulse, slow but steady. He sat by the fire all night, watching the shadows move across their faces. Aspen lay beside the girls, warm and quiet, never once taking his eyes off the woman. Morning came pale and bruised, light leaking through the frost-covered window panes. The fire had burned low, and the air was brittle with cold. Micah stirred the embers, added wood, and ladled more broth into a pan. The scent rose, slow and savory. As it did, the woman stirred. Her eyes opened, startled, panicked. She tried to sit up. "Easy," Micah said gently, moving to her side. "You're safe." She blinked, eyes focusing. "The girls. They're all right. Warm. Sleeping. You've been out a day." Her lips parted. "I remember water. Then you. You were drowning." She stared at him. Then softer. "I said your name." "You did. I don't know why." Micah nodded, his chest tightening. "You know me." I don't think so." She frowned. "Do you know me?" He hesitated. "No," he lied. But something inside him whispered otherwise. She looked at the girls, curled together beneath furs. Her face crumpled, and tears leaked down her cheeks, hot and silent. "Thank you," she whispered. "If you hadn't—" "Don't," he said. "You would have done the same." She said nothing more. Just watched the fire, her fingers gripping the edge of the blanket like a lifeline. That day passed in slow rhythm. Micah gave them food, space, warmth. The younger girl, with dark curls and a curious mind, began to speak. Her name was Junie. The older one, Wren, was quieter, watchful. She limped slightly, though she didn't complain. The woman offered her name late in the afternoon, spoken with quiet hesitation. Stella. He tasted the name in his mind. It fit, like a forgotten tune remembered only when sung. She didn't explain where they'd come from, not yet. But he didn't ask. He'd learned not to pry. Some stories unravel better in their own time. That night, he sat on the porch while snow drifted down in slow spirals. Aspen lay beside him, head on his paws. "She knew my name," Micah murmured to the dog. "Before I said a word." Aspen whined low. Micah watched the dark horizon, his breath curling upward like smoke. A long time ago, when he was no older than Wren, he'd been starving on the edge of a town he no longer remembered the name of. A girl had come outside a bakery with a heel of bread. Said nothing. Just offered it to him, eyes wide and solemn. Her hair had been braided, like Stella's was now. He hadn't remembered that moment in years. Not until today. Not until she whispered Micah like it had always belonged to her. He stood, pulled his coat tighter, and looked back into the glow of the cabin. Inside, 3 strangers slept beneath his roof. But somehow, for the first time in a long while, Micah Callan didn't feel alone. And far off in the trees, the ice whispered again, as if something beneath it was still trying to surface. The wind had softened, as though winter had drawn a breath and held it. Snow still fell, but gentle now, drifting, not driving. Inside the cabin, the fire gave off a steady hush and glow, licking shadows across rough-hewn walls. A pot of lentils simmered. The scent filled the small room with the quiet kind of comfort one doesn't recognize until it's needed most. Micah sat by the hearth, sharpening a knife in slow strokes, his boots drying nearby. Aspen lay curled at the base of the girl's bedding, his warm body forming a border between them and the cold floor. Junie had wrapped her small arms around his neck, still asleep. Wren stirred fitfully, her brow twitching at some dream she couldn't shake. Stella stood near the window, shoulders hunched. Micah had offered her his spare shirt and woolen trousers, cinched with rope at the waist. They swallowed her slight frame, but she didn't complain. She hadn't said much at all since waking again. Her fingers moved across the glass where frost feathered into delicate spirals. "You've a place to go?" Micah asked, voice low so as not to wake the girls. She didn't turn. "There was a claim. My husband's brother said it might still be mine. Some miles north of Silver Point. But the trail was longer than he said. The map he gave me, it was wrong." "You rode alone?" "No choice. Jeb sent the girls and me off after the burial. Said it was better we find something of our own." Micah said nothing for a moment. He set the knife down. "The man who sent you off, was he kin to your husband?" She gave a faint nod. "And the man himself?" "Your husband. Dead near 6 months now. Mine cave-in." She said it without bitterness, without softness, like someone folding a memory she no longer had the strength to carry. Her eyes remained fixed on the frost, but her voice drifted toward him now like smoke from a fire nearly out. "He changed in the end. Work made him hard. There wasn't room for softness anymore. Not even for the girls. I tried to stay until he was gone." Micah didn't offer pity. He only added wood to the fire. The room crackled, brightened. He handed her a tin mug of tea. "You won't reach Silver Point until thaw," he said. "You're welcome to stay. Until the road's passable." Her eyes flicked toward him, cautious, measuring. "I'm not asking for anything in return," he added, voice rough as bark. "And I won't hold you longer than you want to be held." Something softened in her face then. Not trust, not yet, but a kind of loosening. She took the mug. "I'll help where I can," she said. "I imagine you will." That night, the girls ate 2 full bowls each, their color returning. Wren's voice remained quiet, her gaze sharp, always watching Stella as though to take cues for how safe they were. Junie chattered in fits, mostly nonsense, delighted observations, questions for the dog, silly songs sung under her breath. Micah listened without interrupting. He'd never had children of his own. Never imagined himself the sort who might. But the way Junie tucked her feet under her as she sat, the way Wren picked vegetables from her soup in perfect silence, it stirred something unfamiliar and warm in him, something he hadn't named in years. After the girls curled under the quilts, Stella remained near the fire, nursing her tea. Her fingers had stopped trembling. "You've lived here long?" she asked. 4 winters now." "Why?" "Because people don't come here often. And I've learned I do better when they don't." She considered that. "Not anymore, I suppose." Micah cracked the smallest smile. "A dog makes a poor doorman." She smiled back, faint, lopsided, but real. The first he'd seen. "I never had a dog," she said. "My husband said animals made children too soft." Micah looked at Aspen, who had positioned himself so both girls were within reach of his paws. "I'd argue softness might be what saves us." Stella lowered her gaze. "You talk like a man who used to believe something else." "I did." He said no more, and she didn't ask. They sat like that for a long while, the fire spitting softly, the world outside gone utterly white. In the following days, Stella moved like someone trying not to take up space. She rose before the girls, swept ashes, folded blankets, mended torn sleeves with the calm economy of a woman long used to doing much with little. She asked no permission, only worked. And Micah let her. The girls began to stir differently. Less fear, more play. Junie followed Aspen outside, bundled like a turnip, delighting in tracking the Husky's prints. Wren stayed close to the cabin but began to watch Micah, not with suspicion anymore, but study. He taught her to split kindling. She never smiled, but her movements grew sure. Micah kept his distance at first, unsure how to step around the silent grief the 3 of them carried. But each night, Stella sat a little nearer the fire, spoke a little more, told stories sometimes, soft ones, from her girlhood, about wildflowers and willow branches. about quilting bees and old summer fairs. One evening, when snow battered the windows like waves against stone, she hummed. It was an old song, half forgotten, and her voice was rough from disuse. But the tune stirred something in Micah's chest he hadn't felt in decades. He watched her fingers as she sewed a patch on Wren's coat, her braid falling loose over her shoulder. He remembered a girl with that same braid once, a bakery doorway, a heel of bread, eyes filled with something unnameable. He said nothing. Not yet. That night, after the girls had gone to sleep, Stella stood near the fire, looking down at Aspen. "Why does he trust them so quickly?" she asked. "Children, I mean. He knows what's worth protecting." Stella knelt and scratched behind Aspen's ears. The husky leaned into her touch with a sigh. "I don't remember saying your name," she said quietly. "You did. But I didn't recognize you." "That happens sometimes," Micah said. "The mind forgets what the soul remembers." She looked up, startled. "That sounds like something a preacher would say." He chuckled under his breath. "I've read too much, maybe. I didn't think men like you read at all. I didn't used to. But after the war, I found words quieter than guns." Silence hung between them, filled only by the snapping of firewood. "Thank you," she said after a moment, "for saving us. But more than that, for letting us stay." "You don't need to thank me," he said. "You're not a burden." She stood, pulling her shawl closer. "I don't know how long we'll stay, but I don't dread waking up anymore. That's new." Micah looked at her, then at the girls sleeping near Aspen. The cabin, once echoing with emptiness, now hummed with breath, with fire, with fragile ordinary life. "You're welcome here," he said. "As long as you need." She nodded, then turned in. Her steps were quiet, but no longer uncertain. Micah sat by the fire a while longer, sharpening his knife again, though it didn't need it. Outside, the wind had died down. Stars peeked through a thinning sky. The forest beyond remained silent. But something inside the cabin had changed. And though he wouldn't name it yet, not even in his own mind, Micah felt it in the warmth that lingered after she left the room. Not love. Not yet. But the space where it might someday grow. The thaw came slowly, like forgiveness. Each day, the snow softened at the edges, the icicles dripping like a ticking clock. The lake, once sealed in silence, began to murmur. Thin veins of dark water appeared along its surface, cracking open the white crust as though winter itself was exhaling. Micah noticed it first from the ridge, where he often stood at dawn. It was a habit he hadn't broken even with a full cabin. There was peace in that solitude, in the sting of wind against his face, in watching the husky below trace patterns through the snow. Aspen no longer ran ahead as he used to, not as far. He circled back often now, always aware of the three waiting behind. Back at the cabin, Wren stood by the fire reading aloud from an old almanac, her voice flat but careful. Junie built a fort of pine cones and firewood chunks, Aspen patiently allowing her to balance a ragged kerchief on his head. Stella moved through the space with quiet grace, her presence now woven into the wood and warmth like she'd always belonged. She was laughing more. Not the full kind, not yet. But sometimes, when Micah said something dry, her eyes lit and the sound slipped out of her before she could catch it. He didn't try to summon it too often. It came best when left to bloom on its own. He found himself watching her hands often. The way her fingers folded laundry, stirred stew, brushed Wren's hair. He'd begun to recall, in clearer pieces, that moment from long ago, the girl with the braid and the piece of bread offered in silence. He had been little more than bone then, straggling along the edge of a town too broken to welcome strangers. Her hand had been small but steady, and the way she'd looked at him, pitiless, unafraid, had stayed with him longer than any sermon or gunfire. Micah hadn't told her yet. He wasn't sure he would. Maybe it was enough to remember. But sometimes, when Stella sat outside with the girls, face tilted toward a sky turning bluer by the hour, he wondered if some part of her remembered too. The afternoon light had the quality of smoke, gold-touched and slow-moving, when Stella asked, "Did you fight in the war?" Micah looked up from his carving, He was shaping a small horse for Junie's collection, though she didn't know it yet. I did. She didn't press, only nodded, tucking a loose curl behind her ear. Then, after a beat, blue or gray? Blue. Stella nodded again, slower this time. My husband wore gray. He didn't fight, but his brother did. Came back with less kindness than he left with. Micah didn't answer at first. The knife paused in his hand. There was no kindness where I went, he said eventually. Only mud and blood and boys who died before they learned how to live. Did it change you? He looked at her then, long and quiet. I used to think it did, he said. But now I think it just showed me who I already was. She didn't speak, but her eyes held his. And in that look, something passed between them, unspoken, tender, as delicate as breath on cold glass. That night, the wind howled again. Spring might be coming, but winter hadn't left yet. The lake roared with its own voice under the ice, deep and groaning. Stella tossed in her bedroll. Wren muttered in her sleep. Micah lay awake by the fire, Aspen dozing at his side. He heard movement. Stella stood at the window, wrapped in a shawl, watching the trees. Trouble? Micah asked, rising without startling her. No, she said. Just dreaming with my eyes open. He joined her. The moon had risen, full and high, casting silver across the field. The lake in the distance looked like a broken mirror. I remembered something, she said. From when I was little. Before the war. Micah waited. There was this boy. Dirty. Starving. He wandered through the alley behind my mother's bakery. I was maybe 8. I gave him the last piece of heel bread from that morning. She scolded me for it later, said never to feed someone who might come back angry. Micah's breath caught. I don't remember his name. I don't even know if he spoke. But his eyes were the saddest thing I'd ever seen. And the most alive. I remember him, he said quietly. She looked at him sharply. That boy, he said. He never forgot you. Stella turned to him fully, her expression unreadable. The fire behind them flickered low, casting a gold edge to the silver light from outside. I didn't realize it was you, she said, voice smaller now. I didn't expect you to. She wrapped her arms around herself. Her breath shook as she exhaled. I never thought that piece of bread mattered. It mattered more than anything, he said. It was the first time I believed someone might see me as something other than trouble. She closed her eyes. I don't know who I was then. You were kind, he said. Even if you didn't know it. A long silence. I didn't remember your face, she said. But when I saw you in the water, I said your name. I don't know how. Maybe something deeper remembered. She looked down. Does that mean something? He hesitated, then answered, I don't know yet. Maybe it just means we were meant to cross paths again. Stella didn't speak, but her hand brushed his as she turned back to the window. Her fingers barely touched his knuckles. It was nothing and everything at once. They stood there until the fire went to coals and the moon began to dip. Over the next days, something shifted between them. Not in grand gestures. In the quiet spaces. She began humming again, more often. He told her the names of the trees, pointed out tracks in the snow. Wren asked him one morning if he'd ever been a teacher. He only smiled. Micah showed Junie how to whittle a stick into the shape of a bird. She beamed with pride and named it Thistle. Stella said it was the first time she'd seen Junie keep still for longer than 5 minutes. He watched them grow stronger. Health returned to their cheeks. Wren started reading from his old books, asking questions about words Micah thought had long since gone unused. Stella helped him mend the barn roof after a late storm tore 2 shingles loose. She didn't ask for instruction. She climbed and worked beside him until the job was done. When the snow finally cleared enough for a walk to town, Micah made the journey alone. He brought back flour, lard, a small bag of peppermints for the girls. He also returned with news. "There's word of a man asking around," he told Stella that evening. "Looking for a woman traveling with 2 children. Said he was kin." Her face tightened. "His name?" "Didn't say. Just left coin at the saloon to send word if anyone saw you." Stella went still. "I didn't take anything from him," she said. "Just the sled. The horse was mine. The land too, if you count words on paper and not lies in a voice. I'm not saying he's coming, but we ought to be ready if he does." She nodded. Her fingers curled into fists. "He'll want to take us back. Say it's safer. Say I owe him." "You don't owe him a damn thing." "I know. But that doesn't mean he won't try." Micah nodded. "Then he'll find a different woman than the one he thought he sent into the wild." Stella looked at him. Her eyes glinted, not with fear, but with fire. "He won't take the girls," she said. "No," Micah agreed. "He won't." That night, Stella stood closer to him than she had before. Her shoulder brushed his. Her voice, when she spoke, was soft but sure. "I don't want to forget this." "You won't," he said. "It's in you now. I'm not just surviving anymore." He didn't answer. Just took her hand. Held it like it was something precious he'd almost lost. They stood that way for a long time. Outside, the lake had begun to sing again, its surface cracking open beneath the press of the warming sky. And deep beneath that ice, the truth waited, no longer buried, no longer frozen. Just waiting to rise. Spring had only just arrived, but the woods still remembered winter. Though sunlight filtered through the pine canopy, warming patches of thawed ground, ice clung stubbornly to the lake's edge and lay hidden in the shaded soil. The snow no longer blanketed the world, but it still whispered beneath boots and paws, a fragile crust giving way to the season's slow insistence. Birdsong returned in hesitant flurries, as if nature wasn't sure it was safe to breathe again. Micah had begun chopping logs in the early hours, sleeves rolled to the elbow, rhythm steady. Stella watched from the porch, her hands wrapped around a tin of coffee. Her girls were in the garden bed they'd started near the shed, Junie planting marigolds with clumsy delight, Wren sketching their outlines in the dirt with her finger. Aspen lay in the grass nearby, half asleep, ears twitching now and then at some distant noise. They'd settled into a rhythm Micah hadn't known he'd needed. It was quiet, yes, but not the hollow silence of his life before. It was full now, of breath, of voices, of warmth. He could mark time by the way Stella tied her hair, by the cadence of Wren's reading, by the joy Junie took in discovering worms. He no longer counted his days by the stretch of snowfall or the kill of the trapline. He counted them by laughter, by firelight, by the nearness of something that felt a lot like hope. So when Aspen rose, stiff-backed and growling low, Micah knew something had shifted in the woods. Stella looked at him, alert. Wren stood slowly. Junie stopped her planting and moved toward the porch. Micah set the axe down, wiped his hands on his pants, and followed the dog's line of sight. There was a man coming through the trees. On foot, broad-shouldered, with a gray duster and a slouch hat pulled low. He walked like a man who'd spent too much time in saddles and saloons, heavy in the hips, sure-footed on unstable ground. He carried himself with the lazy authority of someone used to being feared. Micah stepped off the porch and met him halfway. "Afternoon," the man drawled, voice smooth as worn leather. "Depends on what you're here for," Micah replied. The man grinned, not kindly. "Just lookin' for someone. Name's Hartley. Jeb Hartley." Micah didn't blink. "You're late." Jeb raised a brow. "That so? I heard about you in town. Heard you were asking." "Well, I like to be thorough," Jeb said, eyes scanning past Micah toward the cabin. "Woman come through here with a couple of girls? Be about—" He mimed a height with his hand. "One shy, one sharp, and a mother with hair like spilled whiskey. She's not taking visitors." "I ain't visiting," Jeb said, all trace of charm disappearing. "I'm here for family. She's not yours to claim." Jeb chuckled. "I reckon the law might say different." "Then go get the law," Micah said, stepping forward slightly. "But you won't find it out here." Jeb's mouth curved, but his eyes stayed cold. "Funny. That's what your kind always says, right before someone gets hurt." Micah didn't move, didn't reach for the rifle slung at the porch rail. He didn't need to. His stillness spoke enough. Behind him, Aspen growled low. Jeb held up a hand like he meant peace. "Look, I ain't lookin' to stir trouble. But that woman's got something that belongs to me. A deed. A claim. My brother, bless his bones, left it behind without proper sorting. She's confused. I'm here to clarify things." "She's got clarity just fine," Micah said. "You need to leave." "I'll give her a day," Jeb said, backing off a few steps, "to get her mind right. After that, I come back with more than words." He turned without another glance, fading into the trees like smoke. Micah didn't speak as he walked back to the porch. Stella stood, unmoving, her face pale but steady. "Jeb?" she asked. Micah nodded. "He wants the deed. He wants control," she murmured. "He always has. You didn't tell me he was your husband's brother." "I didn't think I had to. I hoped, we'd lost him in the storm." Micah studied her face. "He's not gone yet." "No," she said. "He's the kind of man who finds his way back no matter how many doors you close." Wren stepped forward, taking Stella's hand. "We're not going anywhere, Mama." Stella looked down at her daughter, and something flickered across her face. Pain, pride, a deep-set fear she hadn't spoken aloud. "We're not," Micah said, quiet but certain. "You've got a place here." She nodded, but her eyes were far off. That night, Stella sat by the fire long after the girls had gone to sleep. Micah brought her a mug, sat across from her, and let the silence settle. "He tried to buy it," she said eventually. "After Owen died. Said the mine deed was no good without his say-so. Said I'd be better off letting him handle the claim. I told him no. He told me I'd come crawling back." "You won't," Micah said. Stella shook her head. "He's not used to hearing no from women. Not without punishment." Micah looked into the flames. "I've known men like that. They don't understand what to do when they run out of fists. He'll bring someone with him next time. He always finds men who want easy coin. Then I'll be ready." She looked at him, something hard and trembling behind her eyes. "You could send us away. Say it's not your fight. It became mine the day you whispered my name under ice." She exhaled slowly. "You always talk like that? Only when it matters." He leaned forward, hands folded, elbows on knees. "You don't have to fight him alone. You've got people now." She nodded, eyes shimmering. "Thank you," she whispered. "For staying?" he asked. "For seeing me." The next day, they prepared, not for war, but for defense. Micah checked the cabin's locks, walked the edge of the land with Aspen, scanned the forest for paths a man might use on horseback. He showed Wren where to hide if something happened. Junie, too young to understand, practiced tying knots with bits of string Stella had given her. They didn't talk about fear, not directly, but it hummed underneath their chores, steady and sharp. That afternoon, Stella asked to practice shooting. Micah hesitated only a moment, then brought her to the clearing behind the barn. Gave her the old revolver he'd kept from the war. Her hands shook at first, but her eyes were steady. She missed the first 2 shots. Then she found the rhythm. The sound cracked the air like branches breaking under frost. "She'll hear it," she said when they stopped. "He'll hear it too." "Good," Micah replied. When night fell, no one slept easily. Aspen paced. Wren stayed beside her mother, and Junie curled up in the crook of Stella's arm, dreaming of simpler things. Micah sat by the door with the rifle in his lap, heart steady but alert. Jeb returned in the morning. He came with another man, taller, younger, mean-eyed and leather-jacketed. Both wore guns. They didn't come sneaking. They rode in bold, loud, the way men do when they think the sight of them is enough to earn surrender. Micah stepped out to meet them. "Morning, neighbor," Jeb called, dismounting. "Hope you slept well." "Better than you're about to," Micah said calmly. The younger man chuckled. "He's got bark." "He's got more than that," Stella said, appearing behind Micah, rifle in her hands. Her voice was iron. Wren and Junie watched from the window. "You gonna point that at family?" Jeb asked. "You're not family," Stella said. "You're rot in my past." Jeb stepped closer. "That land belongs to my blood." "No," she said. "It belongs to Owen. And what little good was in him died before he did." Jeb's eyes darkened. "You think I won't take it by force?" "I think you'll try," Micah said. "But you'll regret it." The younger man moved, quick. His hand twitched toward his sidearm. Aspen barked, lunging. Micah stepped forward. Stella raised her rifle. And then a voice rang out from the woods. "That's enough." From the pines emerged a figure in a brown coat, badge glinting beneath it. Sheriff David. Old, tall, wiry. Known to both men and time. "Micah," he said. "Got word in town about trouble out here." Micah nodded. "Right on time." David looked to Jeb. "You threatening this family?" "No law says I can't speak my claim. But the law sure says you can't draw on them." David turned to Stella. "You all right, ma'am?" "I am now." The sheriff looked between them. "Jeb Hartley, you've got one warning. Leave this land. Don't come back." Jeb sneered but didn't argue. He turned, spat in the dirt, and mounted up. The younger man followed, sullen. As they rode away, the air loosened its hold. Birds returned to song. Aspen sat again, breathing steady. Micah looked at Stella. She didn't cry. She just stood tall, the rifle still in her hands, her daughters behind her, and the woods wide open ahead. "Thank you," she said again, voice steady now. Micah stepped beside her. "You never needed saving," he said. "Only someone to stand with you." She took his hand then, without hesitation. The storm had passed. But the story was far from over. Dawn stirred the world with a gentle touch, brushing the horizon with gold and smoke. The trees stood solemn in the hush, limbs stretching as if waking from deep sleep. Mist rose from the lake in curling ribbons, soft and uncertain, as if the water hadn't yet decided whether to dream or remember. Inside the cabin, the hearth glowed with the warmth of a fire that had never gone out. Stella moved quietly, braiding Junie's hair while Wren packed dried apples into a small sack. Their motions were calm, practiced, but the air held tension, stretched thin like the surface of thawing ice. Micah stood outside, sharpening his hatchet with slow, steady strokes. His breath curled in front of him, less from cold now than from the weight of decisions. The danger had passed, but not the reckoning. Jeb had left, sure, but men like him rarely surrendered their sense of ownership so easily. Something deeper stirred under the surface, not just vengeance or wounded pride, but something long starved, the fragile question of what came next. Aspen lifted his head, ears pricked. A sound carried on the wind, far off, hollow, like hooves on soft earth, then gone. The husky stood, paced, then returned to Micah's side, nudging his hand with a quiet whine. "I hear it too," Micah murmured. He went inside. Stella looked up, sensing it in his face. "What is it?" "Quiet," he said. "Too quiet." She rose, motioned to the girls. Wren obeyed without question, pulling Junie toward the back room. Stella stepped beside Micah, hand on her rifle. But no visitor came. No figure emerged from the trees. Hours passed, the tension thinning but not dissolving. By mid-afternoon, Wren stood in the yard with a shovel, determined to dig a place for the wildflowers she'd dried during winter. Stella joined her, sleeves rolled, hands deep in the soil. Micah watched them from the porch, arms crossed, a soft smile flickering across his mouth. "You ever think," Stella said, brushing dirt from her hands, "how strange it is, how survival teaches you to stop dreaming?" Micah didn't answer at first. "Sometimes it does," he said finally. "But sometimes survival teaches you which dreams are worth keeping." She looked at him. Her face was sun-touched now, stronger. There were still shadows in her eyes, but they were no longer empty. "I'm starting to think you might be one of mine," she said. And then Aspen barked. Not the warning bark of suspicion, nor the startled sound of prey. This was deeper, urgent, fearful. Micah turned toward the woods, every part of him alert. Stella ran for the girls, pulling them to the porch. Aspen bounded to the tree-lean, teeth bared. And from the brush emerged Jeb Hartley, bloodied, limping, rifle in hand. Alone, but wild-eyed, unsteady. He staggered into the clearing, the butt of his rifle dragging through the grass, his coat torn, face pale. Micah stepped forward, chest tight. "Jeb." The man didn't answer. He sank to his knees in the dirt. His mouth moved like he meant to speak, but no sound came. Stella approached slowly, rifle raised. "What happened?" Jeb's eyes lifted to hers. There was no malice in them now, only fear. "Ambush," he rasped. They followed me after I left. Said I owed 'em for pay. Wanted the deed. I told 'em I didn't have it. Told 'em you wouldn't give it up." He coughed, blood staining his teeth. "They're comin'. Not just for you. For all of it." Micah's jaw tightened. "How many?" "3. Maybe 4. One had a scar down his jaw, called himself Pike. Said they'd burn the whole place down if you didn't hand it over." Micah helped him to his feet, but there was no strength in Jeb anymore. His eyes rolled back, knees buckling. Stella caught him, lowering him gently to the ground. Her face showed no love, but no hatred either. "He's dying," she said quietly. "He chose his path," Micah answered. Still, they carried him inside. Laid him by the fire. Wren brought water. Junie stood behind her mother, clinging to her skirt. Jeb opened his eyes once more. "I didn't mean to not like this," he said. Stella knelt beside him. "I know." Then he was gone. The hush that followed was not silence. It was breath held. Micah moved quickly after that, checking the windows, loading weapons, gathering what little they had to defend themselves. "They'll come at night," he said. "They always do." Stella nodded. "We're not running." "No," he looked at her. "We're not." They moved as one. The girls were placed in the root cellar, blankets and water and food enough for a night. Aspen stayed above with Micah, pacing like he remembered war. Stella took position near the back window, eyes sharp. The sun set. The sky bruised into dusk. And then, footsteps. Faint, crunching, cautious. Micah's breath slowed. He raised the rifle. Waited. A figure stepped into the open. Tall. Scar down his jaw. Rifle slung low. Pike. Behind him, 3 more. One carried a torch. Micah fired first. The torch dropped. The figure with it crumpled. Chaos broke. The men scattered. Shots rang out. Sparks flew as bullets struck the porch. Stella returned fire, her aim calm, exact. One of the men screamed, fell. Micah moved to the other window. Pike charged forward, crouching behind the rain barrel. "Hand it over," he shouted, "or I burn this whole place." "This place isn't yours," Micah called back. Pike lit another torch. Threw it toward the barn. Flames burst. Aspen charged, teeth bared. Pike fired. Missed. Micah tackled him, the two falling into the dirt, grappling. The rifle skidded away. Micah slammed his fist into Pike's jaw. Once. Twice. Pike reached for his belt knife. Stella was there. She raised her rifle, pressed it to Pike's temple. He froze. "Drop it," she said. He obeyed. Micah rose, breathing hard. Blood on his lip. The third man had fled. The barn crackled, half burning. They let Pike live. Bound him, dragged him to a post. Watched the flames die to embers. When the sun rose, the land was singed but still theirs. Stella held Wren and Junie in her arms. Micah stood nearby, Aspen at his side, eyes on the road that now led to safety. The cabin stood. The girls were whole. And something deeper, something that had been building between them like spring under snow, finally bloomed. That evening, Stella found Micah by the lake, where thaw had opened the surface to reflect sky. She stood beside him, silent. "I never thought I'd see another spring," he said. She took his hand. "You were always meant to." He turned to her. "I want to stay," she said. "If you'll have us." "I've been waiting for you," he said, "since I was a boy in an alley." She kissed him then, not desperate, not fearful, just certain. And the lake whispered. The woods hushed. Aspen lay down at their feet. In the distance, smoke curled upward, not ruin, but warmth. And for the first time in a long, long while, Micah Callan chose something. Not solitude, not silence, but love. And it held.